Hello and welcome to Straight Talk with Arun Kumar. My guest tonight is Attorney and Chairperson of New Jersey Republican State Committee, Douglas Steinhardt. Hey, Doug, how are you?
Great, Aaron. How are you today?
Good, good.
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for your time. So how's the great state of New Jersey looking right now?
We're doing great. A lot of energy. Started strong in 2019, flipping the first legislative district, our biggest Republican statewide gains in actually 28 years. We've taken that same momentum and energy and carrying it into 2020, having lost a steady 108,000 Republicans over the last 25 years. We've actually added 113,000 new Republicans back since January 2018. Our fundraising is way ahead of where it was the same time last year, despite COVID. And we've got great candidates from the top of the ticket with President Trump running down to our local candidates. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that they have the tools and the resources they need to be successful in November.
What's your opinion on Governor Murphy's millionaire's tax?
The millionaire's tax, look, the millionaire's tax is candidly, it's just another income tax. It's no different than any other tax that the Democrats propose or adopt. They ultimately all come home to roost in the same place, Aaron, and that's in the pockets of the middle class. And it's not just the millionaire's tax. You know, New Jersey already has the worst tax climate in the country. We got the highest property taxes, the highest tax burden generally in the U.S. That's both in dollars and the percentage of income taken, highest tax rates, the worst business tax climate in the region. And, you know, now they're proposing to raise the corporate business tax another 2.5%, which will give us the highest corporate business tax in the country as well. So not only are we chasing away people, but we're chasing away jobs and job creators.
Yeah. Let me ask you this question. I always have this question about taxes. Taxes have always been a bone of contention between Republicans and Democrats, right? Republicans are in favor of lowering taxes. Am I right?
Well, yeah. I mean, as a practical matter, it's not just.
Is it possible, though? Is it practically possible without debt?
Well, no, I respectfully disagree. I mean, the problem is New Jersey has been, for as long as I can remember, living beyond its means. You have the same conversation, or I assume, around your dinner table every night. You make a certain amount of money, and you need to figure out how to stretch those dollars to make ends meet so that you don't go into debt year in and year out. Government doesn't operate by the same rules, Aaron. When it can't live within its means, it just raises taxes. It takes more from you and me, leaves you and I and our families less to live on. And when it can't do that, it does what Governor Murphy does and proposes to borrow $10 billion just to balance a budget. You know, government needs to do what the hardworking American families have to do every day, and that's choose to live within its means. It doesn't do that. Find me any discussion that Phil Murphy or the Democrats have had all year this year about cutting spending. Everything they're talking about is raising taxes and spending more.
Right. So there's also more burden. There's also borrowing. There's also bonds. Right. There's a lot of stuff going on right now.
Sure. And the problem with the borrowing is, you know, that's money that's not being paid back just in our lifetimes. That's being stretched out over our children's lifetimes and our grandchildren's lifetimes. You know, look, where this COVID crisis really hit home for me, Aaron, is I have two children. They're 22 and 17 years old. And, you know, like, I don't want to be a parent or grandparent that's got to visit his kids and his grandkids on a Zoom meeting, right? Or on FaceTime or Skype because my children can't afford to buy a house in New Jersey, or they can't find a job in New Jersey, or they can't afford to start a life in New Jersey. And that's the path that Governor Murphy and the Democratic legislature has taken us on. We've had a Democratic legislature going back nearly almost 30 years now, and we lead the country in the out-migration of businesses and jobs. We can do better.
What can we do to stop the exodus? A lot of people are leaving New Jersey in the past few years. What can be done? What's your practical plan of action?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that can be done, and I talked about some of them in an op-ed I just recently did in the Star Ledger. You know, the first is tax fairness agreements with states like New York. If you're working in New Jersey, you should be paying taxes in New Jersey. You know, the second was we talked about corporate business taxes a few minutes ago. You know, instead of having the highest corporate business tax in the country, we should have a law that says that our corporate business tax should be a full percentage point lower than the average of the corporate business taxes of all our neighboring states. It's tax friendlier. You know, we all have friends that are in business, you know, that want to be able to start a business here, and, you know, they're being taxed out of the state. A law that requires our corporate business tax to be lower than our neighbors not only incentivizes businesses to come to New Jersey, but it keeps them here. We need to stop investing in antiquated pension programs. New Jersey has, one of the biggest underfunded public pension programs in the country. The police and fire, they've done a good job of managing their own, but on the NJEA side and the CWA side, we've struggled, and that pension system struggled. Meanwhile, Governor Murphy pleads poverty, says that we have this huge unfunded mandate in New Jersey, says that we can't afford to make ends meet, says that the COVID crisis has created all these emergency expenses, yet turns around and makes the biggest pension payment, quarterly pension payment in New Jersey history, $4.9 billion. We need to revamp our pension system. We've talked about simple things, revenue estimation. Right now, revenue estimation is done solely by the governor. We should have a nonpartisan revenue estimating committee who can sit down and look at what our revenues should be for the year, take that solely out of the governor's hands, and then require that our expenditures don't exceed more than 98% of what our revenue projections are going to be. And last but not least, I think it makes a lot of sense that we talk about things like multi-year revenue projections. I'm sure anybody that's in business does the same thing. They look long-term to figure out what their revenue projections might be so they can get a better idea of what their short-term expenditures should be. We don't do any of those things in the state of New Jersey. We live paycheck to paycheck, and unfortunately, it's living off of your paycheck, Aaron, mine, and our neighbors. So Trenton's become an echo chamber when it comes to taxes and spending. And we need to think outside the box a little bit if we're going to keep our friends and neighbors here with us.
Yeah, I read your op-ed, by the way, pretty detailed on the issues there.
Thank you.
So talking about the issues in the state of New Jersey, will the Gateway Tunnel project ever be done? Ever?
Look, the Gateway Tunnel project, I think we all know that there are issues getting back and forth in and out of Manhattan. It's a global business hub. So obviously, not just from that perspective, but just from a Jersey transit perspective in general, we've neglected for a long time our state's infrastructure. And I think we all need to get on the same page and try to figure out how we can make substantial investments in improving our state's infrastructure, our ability to move not just commerce, but move employees and move people back and forth throughout the state if we're ever going to be competitive.
What's the biggest blocker there? I've been hearing about this project for a long time. What's the biggest blocker?
Well, money. No one has the cash to be able to afford a project of that size. So it's all come down to, what is each state contributing and what help, if any, can we get from the federal government?
Your money from where, though? Which is a blocker? Is it the money from the federal side or from the state, within the state itself?
Well, I think it's a combination of all of those things. But the problem is you identify it when you say money from where, because at the end of the day, it's money from either toll payers, rate payers, system users, or taxes. Government produces nothing. So at the end of the day, we subsidize it. And the debate, I think, has long been over what each state contributes and what the federal government contributes as well.
Right. It's been about 2 years, right, since you took charge as the chairman?
It'll be almost 3 years in November.
3 years.
So yeah, we're coming up on the end of 3 years as state chair.
Right. So what would you answer if I were to ask you, what is the situation in the state of New Jersey pre-Steinhardt, post-Steinhardt, or currently Steinhardt?
Well, look, I inherited a state party at the end of Governor Christie's 8 years. For 8 years, he was the face of the Republican Party in New Jersey. And the state party served a very different role at that point in time. The governor was out front and set the Republican Party platform and, ran with it. But when I became chairman, at that point in time, we didn't control any branch of state government. So it was a little bit of a different vehicle for me. So, first thing we started to do was communicate and collaborate better with our legislative leaders, with Senator Kaine in the Assembly, with Leader Bramnick in the Senate, and Leader Bramnick in the Assembly, and start working on trying to get our messaging a little bit more succinct. And after that, it was just being visible. It was building a party. When I took over state party, we had about 64 active donors. We've grown that list to over 4,000 active donors today. As I said, we're growing our registered Republican footprint. We've grown our volunteer list. Our fundraising has increased incrementally almost every quarter since we took over. So, for me, it's always been about building a party, pitching a big tent, opening a big umbrella, whatever you're going to say, and inviting as many people as possible underneath of it. At the end of the day, I think most New Jerseyans have relatively simple wants. I think we all want to live safely. We want to live securely in a house we can afford, in a state we can afford to live in. And, we're working real hard with Republicans around the state and others that I think are tired of the the Democratic promises and then the inability of the Democrats to deliver on them. They're looking for somebody to be a little bit more reasonable and more sensible, and that are actually going to go to Trenton and fight for them, or go into their counties or their communities and fight for them and keep their promises.
All right, I'm going to push you a little bit there, but the registered voter percentage in terms of Republicans when compared to Democrats, it's still low.
Yeah, it's grown. It's gotten bigger, but it hasn't grown.
Not as much.
It hasn't grown at anywhere near the rate that it was growing before. As I told you before, we had lost a steady stream of Republicans every midterm election going back to Christy Whitman's first midterm 25 years ago. And since then, we've erased that entire number of lost Republicans, 108,000 with 113,000 new registrants. We're registering new Republicans every day. We have thousands of volunteers out right now working as part of one of the biggest victory efforts that we've had in New Jersey in a long time. I feel real good about our ability to pick up congressional seats here in New Jersey. Now, if you think about it, New Jersey doesn't usually get the kind of attention that a Florida or Ohio does in a federal
battleground states. Yeah.
Yeah, right. But, we need 20 seats to take back control of the House of Representatives. And we have as many as 4 targeted seats right here in New Jersey, seats that the NRCC has targeted. So the ability to pick up almost 20% of that 20 needed to take control of the House of Representatives. I'm confident that we'll reelect Jeff Andrew in CD2, and we'll reelect Chris Smith in CD4. But
CD4.
CD3, CD5, CD7, CD11 are all districts that President Trump won in 2016 that I feel confident that he'll carry again in 2020. And we have great candidates in every one of those. And that's not to overlook Rick Beda, who's running for the U.S. Senate, and a lot of the really talented candidates that we have running in other districts. Claire Gustafson in CD1, Christian Anuda, Billy Primpa. We have some really great candidates running in other districts around the state that we feel optimistic about our abilities to actually do better than we did in 2018 and even better than we did in 2016.
Right. Still, if you look at I'll come to elections, but if you look at the voter registration, right, Democrats are about 39% and Republicans are around 22%. It's still fairly low. Did you guys ever analyze or self-introspect as to what the reason is behind the fairly large difference in voter registration?
Yeah, look, I can't speak to why we lost as many seats as we did before. I can only I've been really focused prospectively. Now, obviously, to take a prospective approach to anything, you got to look at what you did before and see what you can do better. But I think our messaging has been much sharper in the last 3 years. We've been much more on point. We've been a lot more visible, spending time in all 21 counties. I spent a lot of time running around to Republican clubs and organizations and working with local candidates to make sure that they have the tools and resources they need to get elected locally. And it's that grassroots, bottom up type of approach to statewide politics. And if we could be successful in a handful of municipalities and then turn those into county victories and into legislative victories, it puts us in a good position to do what we're going to do this year, which is pick up congressional seats.
Would New Jersey ever turn red or at least purple?
If I have my way, it will.
All right. So do you think President Trump being on the ballot this year would have any impact on the state and congressional races in New Jersey?
Of course, and I'll take one district in particular because I've been working on this one over the last day or two, but CD11, where Rosemary Becky is challenging Mikey Sherrill. Mikey Sherrill is a congresswoman who went out and promised to be independent and has voted with Nancy Pelosi 98% of the time, amongst the highest amongst her freshman colleagues. Rosemary Becky is a fantastic candidate. She helped co-author the 529 savings plan that allows a lot of us to save money for our children to go to college. She's bright, she's articulate, she's hardworking. She's had 2 special needs children that she's tended to as she's grown her professional career. But in that district, there's a district that President Trump carried in 2016. Assemblyman Weber lost in 2018 when the president wasn't at the top of the ticket, but there were 39,000 people, 39,000 Republicans that didn't vote in 2018, that voted in 2016, that we'll see come out again this year in 2020. And we're working hard to make sure that we reach out to and make contact with every one of those. So, having the president at the top of the ticket in a presidential cycle makes a big difference for us in some of these targeted congressional races.
GOP has 2 issues in the state of New Jersey, from what I know. One is voter registration, right, and voter turnout. What could be done to increase the voter turnout?
So we've had, like I said, we've had well over 1,000 volunteers helping us this year on voter turnout, which is particularly important in this all vote by mail cycle that we're all having to contend with this time around. So it's a combination of, phone calls, door knocks where we can do it safely, electronic outreach, whether it be through social media or email, and it just a widespread education campaign. So the state party has a link. It's njgop.org/VBM for vote by mail that gives people some information on how they can get their ballots, make sure that those ballots are completed, cast, and actually track them and make sure that they're actually received. So a big part of what we're doing between now and November 3rd is engaging voters and making sure that they're actually filling out their ballots and getting to the polls to vote. As you might also know, Aaron, we joined with the Trump presidential campaign and the Republican National Committee to file a suit against Governor Murphy over the whole vote by mail scheme. That's still pending in front of Judge Ships in the federal district court in New Jersey. But we filed actually a week ago today for injunctive relief in that suit, trying to get people the ability to go and vote in person. But as of yet, we haven't received decisions on that front.
Right. It's funny you mentioned about vote by mail, since this election is completely different, which from any election we ever had, right? For the first time, entire nation is going for vote by mail. What's your take on? What's your concerns on vote by mail?
Well, the concerns in New Jersey rest primarily the fact that we have voter rolls that haven't been vetted in some cases in decades. We have people that are getting ballots that have moved, that have died, that are under more than one name, and we don't have a system that is equipped for making sure that only those people that are registered to vote are actually getting ballots to vote them. And the other problem that we have really is the only guaranteed way that any of us has to actually know that our vote that we cast is going to be counted is to be able to go to a polling place and vote in person. What the governor's done by creating this all vote by mail cycle is just introduced human hands in more places than they're necessary to be efficient. And anytime you add that human factor, you run the risk of there being problems, intentional or unintentional. We saw that with mail trucks catching fire in Morris County, just in Sussex County a week or so ago, with 1,666 ballots that had been mislabeled and left in a box, left over from the July primary. They were just counted a week ago, and the rampant fraud that we saw in Patterson. So whether it was unintentional, intentional, accidental, there are problems when you try to force through an all vote by mail system. The system that we had in place before worked. We had an absentee ballot system where people that if they didn't want to go in person or felt that they could request a ballot. And there was some level of checking that went on to make sure that the person requesting was the person who was actually getting the ballot. But you still had the ability to go vote in person if that's where you felt most comfortable. And unfortunately, Governor Murphy's taken that away from 9 million New Jerseyans.
Right. Needless to say, this is census year. Do you think redistricting or gerrymandering is a concern?
Well, look, we take the redistricting process very seriously. We launched our redistricting committee a couple of months ago so that we could really get ahead of the curve. But the Democrats in New Jersey tend to do when they feel threatened or challenged, change the rules. So they're looking to delay the redistricting process a full 2 years so that they can get through the 2021 election cycle with the same lopsided map that they've used over the last 10. Whether or not we challenge that in court or not remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is that, we are looking very hard at making sure that the map that comes out of the next 10 years is one that's fair and accurate and reflects the will of the voters in New Jersey.
Right. Talking about the party, there's an opinion that the Republican Party is against minorities, against women, against people of color. What's your party doing to alleviate those concerns?
It's a false narrative, Aaron. It's a false narrative. I mean, we've worked hard to embrace folks from every demographic in New Jersey and every community. I don't think wanting to put food on your table is an issue of race. I don't think wanting to be able to provide a job or have a job for your family is an issue of race. I don't think wanting to live in a state that's safe or secure or where you can afford to raise your family is a question of race. Those are all issues that we talk about every day as a Republican organization. Those are the issues that we've embraced. They're relatively simple, reducing taxes, relaxing regulations, rewarding people for hard work, respecting our state and federal constitutions. We've done, in my humble opinion, over the course of the last 3 years, a good job of growing our Republican footprint in every demographic in New Jersey, and we're going to continue to do that. I think that, as I said, there are a lot of people in New Jersey that have a lot of things in common right now, and that's wanting to live in a state that's more affordable and fighting a governor and a government at every turn that's making it harder and harder to do that.
Why is that the case, though? Why is the stigma on the Republicans and not the Democrats? How did that happen?
Yeah, look, I can't tell you how it happened. I can only tell you what I've been working on since I've been here, and that's making sure that that's not the case in the Republican Party, that we're running now, and I don't believe it to be. I look around at the functions that I attend. I look at the folks running for Congress with us right now. As I said, Billy Primp is a great candidate. Christian Anuda is another great candidate. Claire Gustafson, Rosemary Becky, you name it. We have a wonderful slate of folks running in every congressional district in New Jersey this time around, and that's just a small snapshot of where we've been working, but engaging in communities around the state to make sure that they understand that the Republican Party is open to them, that our goals are largely the same as theirs, and that's just, as I said before, making sure that we have a safe and affordable state for people to plant roots and live.
Right. Okay. Is Doug Steinhardt in the gubernatorial race, state of New Jersey?
Well, look, it's clear that Phil Murphy's failed New Jersey. He's failed at the big stuff, like managing the COVID crisis, improving the business climate in our state, creating jobs for our citizens. He sent COVID positive patients to nursing homes. He's raised taxes at nearly every opportunity. I made sort of a joke the other day that I think every Phil Murphy sentence has a noun, a verb, and a tax increase in it. He's failed at the little stuff, turning motor vehicle into a nightmare. I'm one of those parents that had to actually sleep overnight at the Flemington Motor Vehicle Agency so my 17-year-old could get his driver's license. But our state, I think, deserves new leadership, and the governor is just failing on all of those fronts, broken his own executive orders. If New Jersey's ever going to be a beacon of prosperity and opportunity for everyone, of our 9 million members, we can do better than Phil Murphy. And I think Phil Murphy is vulnerable to the right person. In 2017, he was really an unknown, but in 2020, we know what he's all about. And in 2021, the Republicans are going to do what they can to expose that. People from all corners of New Jersey have been asking me to run for governor. And, I've been giving my future and the state's future some serious thought. But for the time being, Aaron, I'm going to tell you the same thing I'm telling everybody else. My focus is 100% on November 3rd. It's making sure that we continue the momentum that we started in 2019 and continue to pick up seats. We're going to do our part to get President Trump over the finish line, to make sure that he gets control of the Republican Congress. Because I will say this, with a Republican majority in Washington, the president can get another tax cut done. With the Republican majority in Washington, we can send AOC back to the minority. With a Republican majority in Congress, we can retire Nancy Pelosi once and for all. So there's a lot of good that we get done with us focusing on the task at hand. And the task at hand is continuing to build a Republican Party and making sure that we have a successful November 3rd. And that's enough for anybody. And I can assure you that's enough for me.
You still didn't answer my question, though. Are you in the governorship race or no?
I'm not. My answer is what I told you. I said right now my focus is solely and exclusively on November 3rd. Ask me that question on November 4th, and we'll see what life brings. But for right now, we gotta win Republican races.
All right, we'll talk again in November. I'll call in my show and we'll talk exclusively on the governorship race.
We can have a dialogue then. But right now, let's do what we're supposed to do and let's win.
Okay. So there are other people in the race too, right? There's John Bramnick in the race for next year. I know you don't want to talk about it, but still, I'm going to push you a little bit there. There's John Bramnick in the race, and there's Sean Golden, Monmouth County Chair, in the race. So
you'd have to ask both of them. I'm not aware of any announced candidate for governor right now, other than one.
Citarelli.
You'd have to ask anybody else what their intentions are. But
Jack Citarelli is.
I say announced. You've only got one announced candidate, but you'd have to ask Assemblyman Bramnick what his intentions are. You'd have to ask Sheriff Golden what his intentions are, and if there's anybody else out there in the woodwork, you can ask them theirs. But my answer is what I gave you before, and that is we've got enough work to do right now, making sure that we get Republicans elected November 3rd.
So let's get to the federal level a little bit here. So making Supreme Court nominees so close to the elections, is that a political move? Because your opponents are claiming that filling Supreme Court vacancy has become a political lifeline for President Trump just to avoid the COVID issue. Is that right?
Aaron, with all due respect, if the president's term does not end, is not over. And it's somewhat nonsensical to me to think that if there's another issue that comes up tomorrow, should we defer on it until, January of next year, until after November to see what the election results are? The president has to serve out his term. The fact that the Supreme Court seat became vacant now, would we be having this discussion if the Supreme Court seat had become vacant in June? Or what if it had become vacant in February? Pre-COVID, or at this point in time last year? Like, when is the line? I would argue that the line is the end of the president's term. The seat is open now. I would assume the president will move to fill it. I would assume that the Republican Senate will move to confirm. And that's the president's responsibility. No different than any other decision he needs to make or issue with which he's faced between now and the time his term ends, whenever that is.
All right. Before we wrap up, do you have any message for our viewers?
Yeah, look, my message is that the Republican Party in New Jersey is open for business. I think the Democrats have been over-promising for decades and under-delivering. And the extent that folks may think that the Republican Party is not for them, you just don't know that the Republican Party that we've developed and the way it's evolved over the last several years. So we're spending a lot of time networking and talking and just mingling with New Jerseyans, sharing, our stories and their stories. But as I said, at the end of the day, I think we've got a great New Jersey family here. And if I've learned anything, it's that family is worth fighting for. So, we're fighting for our Republican family. We're fighting for New Jerseyans and their families every day so that, New Jersey becomes a national leader in things other than taxes and out-migration. And it becomes a place where people want to develop their businesses, want to plant their roots, want to stay, want to raise their children, and can afford to do all those things and retire too. So, visit us online, visit us on social media, follow our messages, support our candidates, and I promise you we'll be in a better place than we will be with a state led by Democrats.
I know this is a really busy time for you this time of the year, so I appreciate your time.
I appreciate yours.
Thank you very much.
I appreciate your show, and thanks for sharing your audience with me.
Thank you very much for your time. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have for tonight. Until next week, keep watching Monitor TV, TV5. Thank you. God bless America.